John Nichols.
It's good to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, let's do this. Nice to see you. How are you?
I think we all have to qualify our answers to that question in these times because there's a lot of tough stuff going on, but personally, I'm fine.
Yeah, well, that's good to hear.
I hope you are as well.
I am personally fine. I feel like, if you're still alive and able to eat, you're doing pretty well. Okay, let's jump into it. So the convention, it's over, the Democratic National Convention. And you said it had there were a lot to be proud of, moving speeches, voices representing wide swaths of the country, and a history-making VP nomination. But you said it was lacking in actual policy proposals, and I think you are right if we look at the tape. John Nichols, my guest today, called it politically cautious and ideologically inhibited. And now you are here to discuss. John writes for Politics About the Nation, and is the national affairs correspondent there. John, you're also the author of your recent book, The Fight for the Soul of the Democratic Party, the enduring legacy of Henry Wallace's anti-fascist, anti-racist politics, of which we saw very little discussed in the convention. Talk about what you saw and your thoughts about where maybe it should have been.
Sure. Look, I think that the convention is a point where we can take a measure of a political party. Obviously, the Republican convention gave us a very good measure of that party, without a doubt.
Terrifying.
Well, terrifying and also all Trumpian, Trump top to bottom. They didn't even adopt a platform. They just said, well, whatever Trump says goes for us. Now, the Democrats were much better than that, much more diverse, much more sincere in, I think, their efforts to communicate. And there were things that were, as you said, and as I wrote, there were things that are much to be complimented. However, when you look at the whole of the 4 days of the Democratic National Convention, what you see is two basic themes that they came back to again and again and again. Joe Biden is a nice guy. He's nice to people in elevators. If you're on the phone with your mom or your grandmother, he's going to take the phone and he's going to talk to them. And we know that. We don't know that just once. We know that again and again and again, every single night, repeated again and again and again. The wonderful stories of Joe Biden being a nice guy. Okay, so that was delivered. The other one is Trump is not a nice guy.
No.
And that was, I think, actually some of the most powerful parts of the Democratic Convention were explaining in human terms what a bad player Trump is, and sometimes attaching it to policy. The young woman who was talking about her father who died of COVID-19 in Arizona, and I thought her presentation was incredibly powerful. The girl who was writing about how her family was separated by Trump's immigration policies. I think it was an 11-year-old girl. Very, very powerful and exactly right. Delivered again and again and again each night. Totally appropriate, understandable. But what the gap is I thought, what does this nice guy who seeks to defeat this bad guy want to do once he comes to power, if indeed he is elected, if Joe Biden is elected with a Democratic House and potentially a Democratic Senate? What does he and what do the people around him want to do, A, to address the immediate pain of the moment, and B, to make sure that we don't fall into the political traps that made it possible for a Donald Trump to be narrowly win the Electoral College, be defeated in the popular vote, but still come to the presidency. And where I think they fell down was not in giving more time and more energy to their inspired, young, often very young, leaders who are coming up and who frankly have huge followings. Why give Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez 95 seconds, right? Why not give her 5 minutes?
Okay, but we know why, right?
Yes,
we not know exactly why. I feel like I would like the Democrats not just to paint a picture of a more progressive America, but actually be for a more progressive America. So we have some of those, as you said, AOC, the Squad, others. But the Democrats that we're voting for, we are really just voting against Trump right now. And I feel like the convention said, hey, you can get under our big tent, even if you still are staunchly a one-person, a one-issue voter. You can still get under our big tent because Trump is a disaster. And I feel like it was actually kind of well played, because had they stood up and taken stances, they would have turned half the population off, the people we need to vote along with us, and they would have given a lot of food to the right-wing talk machine to then, spin. Thoughts?
The right-wing talk machine doesn't need food. It's already full, right? And full of it.
But how they do.
Oh no, but what I'm saying is they're going to take whatever they don't need anymore. It doesn't. There's nothing you can do that will make them worse than what they are. They literally will make things up if there isn't something to talk about. And we see that every single day. And so my argument is that there are a lot of people out in America who are disenchanted, disenfranchised, disengaged. We have elections in this country where roughly, if we're lucky in a presidential election, you might get toward a 60% turnout. That's lower than just about any major democracy in the world. And what it tells us is there's a tremendous number of voters or potential voters who are out there who could be participants in election, but have not been turned on, have not been excited by the politics that they've been given so far. And
God, I'm so annoyed by those people. Like, you're gonna die. Like, at this point, like, why do I have to stroke the excitement factor of the middle of the road voters? Like,
this isn't middle of the road voters necessarily, though. This is the important thing to understand. The middle of the road voters, to the extent that they exist, and I think they barely exist, the so-called swing voters, they're there. They're already in the mix. And obviously this convention did a lot of outreach to them. In fact, this convention did a lot of outreach to conservative Republicans.
Yes.
People like John Kasich.
Right.
But where the gap comes in, I would argue, is, painting a bigger picture, painting on a broader palette, giving people more entry points into the Democratic Party at this point. And so they were so constrained in their discussion that they didn't have anybody up there explaining universal basic income. They didn't have anybody up there explaining Medicare for all. They didn't have anybody explaining things that are, yes, a little beyond where Joe Biden is, maybe a lot beyond where Joe Biden is, but within the realm of where the party is, where a lot of the discourse in the party is. And so why not give Andrew Yang 5 minutes to talk about universal basic income and acknowledge that this is not the official policy of the party right now, but it's something that has been a part of the discourse within the party. Instead, they had Andrew Yang talking about what a nice guy Joe Biden is. Why not give?
You're going to have to draw your own conclusion that maybe he'll send you a check.
Yeah.
Nice.
Why not? Exactly. Why not give Pramila Jayapal a chance to explain Medicare for all? Why not give Ro Khanna a chance to explain why we need, instead of one payment of $1,000 or so, a little more because of COVID-19 and mass unemployment, that we need monthly payments of $2,000, and a plan that he has not just on his own, but with Tim Ryan, who actually sought the presidency briefly. Why not bring people into the mix and into the discussion so that if you did tune into this, if you checked into this, you heard a bunch of ideas that you're like, wow, I find that appealing. Well, one of the reasons that didn't happen is because at this point, the Democratic Party is running an incredibly cautious, incredibly narrow campaign. Now, if that prevails, if, as you suggest, everybody feels good under the big tent, then it will be rated a success and everybody will celebrate. But, or everybody who's a Democrat, I guess. But if this narrow, so-called, narrow route to victory gets diverted and they don't get there, right? If they fall short again, then, you're going to have to ask yourself the question, why didn't you go bigger? Why didn't you try harder? Why did you, put the kid bumpers on, so that you would possibly give people bigger ideas and bigger possibilities?
Because this is my thought about why. Sure. Because for every entry point that is an exclusionary point for someone else who may have been a voter. So with no entry and exit points, they're just like nice guy. They're running on nice guy.
They are.
Everybody we probably could use a nice guy. That's like one thing that everybody can kind of agree to.
Well, actually, technically, I think there's a substantial portion of the electorate that doesn't agree to that. But they're already going.
Yeah, they're going to vote. Right.
And I understand that. In fact, I was talking to Mark Pocan, the Congressional Progressive Caucus co-chair there the other day, and we were talking about a lot of issues in that. And one of the things he said was, yeah, I do think there's a huge constituency for a normal president, somebody who doesn't just give you constant chaos. And I do understand that. But what I'm going to suggest to you is that in a country where massive numbers of people do not participate in the political process, and where those people are disproportionately younger, lower income, folks who actually should be, by every measure, in this process, why not give them more entry points in? If we presume that, anybody who's looking for...
They're not going to come, John. They didn't fucking come for Bernie, right? I mean, they did, but not as much as we wanted.
But they did come, intriguingly enough. They have come in the past, sometimes in history. And we have had higher turnout, by the way. I mean, we are not at a point where we have been having the highest turnouts. We had much higher turnout in the past. And so we have to start to look for ways to get more engagement with our politics. And again, I'll give you an example. On Labor Day, or going into Labor Day, I spoke with the president of the United Electrical Workers Union. It's a small union that has a great history and has been very principled in its politics for a very long time. And they did an intriguing thing in their endorsement of, well, they didn't actually endorse, I should make it clear. They're what they refer to as their strategic recommendation on the presidential race.
There you go.
Yeah. They said flat out, America, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but they said, America really needs a president who is going to, be very, very serious about taking on corporate power and transforming the politics and the governance of this country, but it's not going to get it out of this election. I mean, that was right up front. They basically said, you're going to be disappointed. And they bluntly said that they have very low expectations for Joe Biden. They think that he will make many of the same corporate compromises that have been made in the past. However, the working class can't survive another 4 years of Donald Trump. And they went into the detail on that. But this is why I like that. Why I thought that was a very powerful statement, was because they were leveling with workers. They were speaking to them as adults. And instead of saying, Joe Biden's the greatest thing since sliced bread, nicest guy you ever met in an elevator, what they were saying was, no, Biden will disappoint, but stopping Trump is the critical thing. And then once you have Biden there, you have the opportunity to push and pull and maybe make things happen.
Say that at the DNC. You can't be like, this guy's going to disappoint everybody.
No, you don't have to say that, but you can offer alternative ideas and bigger and bolder and more ideas.
Yeah, but if Joe Biden doesn't have those bigger and bolder and more ideas, then what? If he's like, we're just still going to bail out GM and we're going to let Monsanto spray poison on your food, but at least I won't have my finger on the button. Like what kind of real leveling?
Because that's where a subtlety comes in here. This would be my argument. This is the subtlety of it. When you allow a more diverse set of voices from the party, you communicate to people that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are open to more ideas, that they can be pushed, that they can be encouraged, that they can be pressured. And when you narrow the set of ideas that are talked about, you don't communicate that. And so my argument is that at the convention, I would have put more ideas on the table. I would have acknowledged that there are debates within the party about those ideas, and I would have let people sort that out themselves, let them think about that, and let them engage and find their entry points in. Again, I believe a cautious campaign that is narrowly calibrated to get to some sort of, small victory is a very, very dangerous campaign. Mm-hmm. I think that is an incredibly dangerous way to do politics in this era. And it is simply much wiser to, say, look, Joe Biden may not be everything you want. However, he leads at this point a political party that has a wide range of energetic ideas, including bold proposals for reform of policing, for addressing systemic racism, for saving the post office, for real healthcare for all, for free college. And no, the party may not be all agreed on every one of those things, but the fact of the matter is, you make Joe Biden president of the United States, you make Kamala Harris vice president of the United States, you've got an opportunity to start exploring and working toward these things that you will not have if Donald Trump is reelected. And I just think, I think that too many of our political leaders treat voters as just
morons.
I wasn't going to use that word, but no, treat them almost as children. They're like, they have to be given a very soft, very.
I'm sorry, but if a lot of people won't come out to vote, given the fact that we're on an ecological crisis, we're on the brink of starvation here, there's like chaos after chaos, then they are kind of acting like children.
Well, whether they're acting like children or adults, however, whatever it is, the fact of the matter is, I don't think that the Democratic Party has done enough to try and mobilize a mass turnout and
I'm with you.
More people engaged. Yeah. And I believe that sincere efforts, both structurally and also ideologically, to open up the doorways, to open up the process, to give people more to get excited about, is really, really vital. We don't have multi-party politics in the United States.
Okay, but let's look into the future, right?
Yeah.
We give them something. I like what you said about letting sort of the AOCs and the other progressives, Andrew Yang with the UBI and the other folks who are kind of championing one issue, come and talk about the issue and maybe have used the platform and used the time to, educate people about what some of the Democrats stand for, because then they could have split it and be like, that's those guys. We're still middle of the road. We're not going to rock the apple cart other than being not insane. Right. So that's but then down the road, well, maybe it's good. Maybe people are like, hey, we wanted that thing. We wanted the UBI. Let's get rid of Biden and bring in somebody new.
Remember that Donald Trump and the Republicans are already saying in their ads that Joe Biden is completely tethered to the radical left, right? That AOC and Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and Ayanna Pressley and Bernie Sanders and the Democratic Socialists of America are guiding Biden's campaign, right? That's the whole Republican message. And yet the Democrats didn't even put those people up, or a lot of them up, in any kind of meaningful way and let them talk. And so you're getting the whole hit from it. Right? You're taking the hit, but you're not actually doing the kind of outreach that would say, yeah, these people they didn't win every platform fight. Bernie Sanders didn't win the nomination, but this is a part of this broad coalition. And these ideas are entertained. They will potentially rise. And if somebody doesn't want that, if somebody doesn't want healthcare for all, if they don't want free education, if they don't want to address the climate crisis, if they don't want to radically reform policing so that we can actually address systemic racism in law enforcement, if they don't want that, well, they're already going to vote for Trump, right? And so it's not like you're going to lose people by highlighting that. Mm-hmm. What you have the potential to do is to invite more people in, because, yeah, they know that Joe Biden is not some great lefty, but that a
There
Democratic.
are other lefties on there.
And it will have place. It will have a place in the Congress and the Senate for a bolder politics.
We're speaking with John Nichols, writer about politics for the nation and its national affairs correspondent. John, before you came on, I was reading from this fine treatise, Gotham, A History of New York City.
A great book.
It's such a great book. I love it. I just went over a little bit of the history of New York City, of Labor Day, coming off the Labor Day holiday. And now there's no more parades.
No.
There's very little even opportunity for labor to reach the masses. It's not like you get a lot of union heads or even union members on TV. We're always discussing Trump's tweets and his not tweets and how rude he is. And, meanwhile, all this stuff kind of passes by. Because the language of labor is so missing. I mean, it said, they were holding signs that said no rent, even back in the 1800s. We're holding these same signs now. What do you make of the giant gap that is in our discussions, our national discussions, be they mediated or through the news media or just with each other, where the lack of discussions about those things, they're just so not normal that if the DNC started talking about them, it would be like a shock to most Americans who are watching CNN.
Well, you're right. You're absolutely right that our media and frankly, a lot of our political elites have failed to discuss working class issues for the whole of the working class, which, by the way, is a great majority of Americans.
Something about working class issues. People are like, what? That's why Bernie Sanders was like, oh, you're speaking my language. They love.
That's right. And here's they failed for so long that you're right. It can be shocking. But this is the interesting thing to emphasize. In 1944, Franklin Roosevelt was talking about an economic Bill of Rights. He was literally saying the Constitution of the United States was insufficient because it included basic rights to express yourself and, right to speak, right to assemble and that, but it didn't include economic rights. And he was arguing you can't really be free unless you have economic security. He was talking about jobs, healthcare, education, guaranteed, right? So, and you know what happened when you talked about those guarantees? Massive, overwhelming landslide victories, right? It's going bigger. And what I keep trying to emphasize to folks is that right now in our politics, in our discourse, it is so narrow, it is so constrained, it is so weak that, I don't think that people who don't participate are, I don't think we should beat them up. I think we should say, look, we understand why you disengaged. We understand why you don't think that politics can change anything. Because for an awful lot of time, you had politicians in both parties who didn't talk about changing anything, at least not in the fundamental ways. And so now it becomes necessary to reintroduce people to a language of politics that actually is consequential. And you could start by saying, for instance, as an example, as regards to labor, we're going to get rid of Taft-Hartley. We want to eliminate the Taft-Hartley provisions that make it difficult, in some places impossible because of so-called right-to-work laws, to organize a union and collectively bargain. The deck is so stacked against working people that we actually create a circumstance in which their ability to organize is denied. And the absurdity of that, and how we should explain it, is that in the aftermath of World War II, when U.S. forces were in Germany and Japan, they worked with Germans and Japanese folks on the ground to write constitutions. They wanted to have new constitutions in Germany and Japan that would protect against the rise of fascism and authoritarianism and, the failure of a small d democratic state. They wanted to encourage democracy to work. And you know what they did in both of those constitutions? Guaranteed the right to collectively bargain and to organize. They didn't leave it up to grabs or say, well, maybe Mississippi won't do that and Michigan will or something like that. They guaranteed it. And why don't we have political leaders today who would say, yeah, We were right back then. Eleanor Roosevelt was right when she did a Universal Declaration of Human Rights and helped to produce that, which had a guarantee of the right to join a union and to organize and collectively bargain. And so the interesting part about it is, I suppose some people might think that radical. I actually think if it's introduced in that way, you'd have massive numbers of Americans who would say, that actually makes a lot of sense. And that's where you begin to open up your politics. That's where you begin to create a new language of possibility. Our problem in our politics is that too frequently our media and our political elites, instead of giving people a language of possibility, give them a language of, compromise and caution and, well, you can't really do that. And I tell you, at this point, a language of compromise, caution, and you can't really do that is dangerous, because it opens up a space for a Donald Trump or somebody to step in and say, oh, I can do stuff.
Right. Yes. John Nichols, what would be the risks to the party if they came out swinging with a progressive platform? Because, I mean, the powers that be, when Bernie came out swinging with a progressive platform, kind of came out swinging with a big stick, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, of course.
What's the risk?
Well, I mean, look, here's the risk. The risk is that they'll be accused of being, in the sway of the radical left. Like, the risk is that the Republicans will put up ads on TV with pictures of Bernie Sanders
right. But they're already doing that, as you said.
Right. That already happened.
I guess
what's the risk is no risk. The risk is that everything that's already happening would be happening. Right. And so my argument is that it's kind of the worst of all worlds, right? You're being attacked for doing something you didn't do. Whereas if you actually did it, if you actually took that extra step and said, as I would in the Democratic platform, we are for Medicare for all, healthcare for everyone as a right. We're going to fix this thing. We are for free higher education as a right. We're going to fix this thing. And we're for legalizing marijuana.
I was wondering, why couldn't they say that one at least?
I mean, it's a simple one. And we are for real safety. And that means safety in our communities that yes, our communities are safe and we can walk our streets and things of that nature, but we are also safe from police violence. And we're going to make sure that the future is a future in which we address the fundamental challenges in our society: systemic racism, climate crisis, inequality. We do that because once we do that, we can actually live dramatically better lives.
It still annoys me that people can't just see that.
Like a lot of people do. I think a lot of people do see that.
Yeah.
The problem is our media and political elites do not always offer us.
Thank you for letting me play the devil's advocate on this, because as I was reading through your thing, I was like, yes, wouldn't it just be wonderful? And it would be for me, but I am surrounded, and our media atmosphere is so saturated with people who are like, universal basic income. I feel like you are certainly doing your part, and hopefully we're doing our part here on Act TV to bring these concepts out to the people so that we can talk about them, so they can be part of the media landscape, part of the discussion, so that then, as things continue to build, it will be not such a big shock if someone says it on a big national stage, like at the convention. Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. And it's why I appreciate you so much, because, the discussion that we're having here is exactly the way we should discuss it. There should be, when we say, yeah, we need to have a progressive platform, a lot of people say that. That's done all the time. But it's good to have the challenge to say, well, but won't that create a danger here? Or won't that do this? Because then when we go deeper and we actually begin to discuss the reality of it, what we find is that the fears that have so infected the Democratic Party over the last 20 to 30 years are unfounded. And the genius of Franklin Roosevelt back in 1932, when he said we have nothing to fear but fear itself, is still true. It still holds. instead of being afraid of going big, of being bold, of really offering people something different, Democrats should be confident in doing so.
Yeah, they're basically
look at the polling data.
You can't, if you're just saying, I'm totally with you, because you can't fight. You can't fight. You can't fight something. You have to just create a new thing, and people will come to it. So it is a disappointment that the only thing really that we created was like, nice guy. We got a nice guy. Although for me, it's enough.
Oh no, and you know what, Julianna, the one final thing I would say is that it may very well be enough, and that we can accept, and we should. It may be enough to offer as the alternative to Donald Trump a nice, normal person. I understand that. But the challenge is that electing a nice, normal person to the presidency, if you don't take the Senate, if you don't have a really solid majority in the House, if you don't have a vision for governing in that year that after you come to power, there are tremendous dangers there. Because there's a reason why we talk about FDR's first 100 days. There's a reason why when you look back at other presidents who have been successful, they did a lot right at the start of their presidency. Because you have to get people engaged with the notion that this party being in power matters, that it actually does solve problems that are pressing, that are immense, and that it does so very, very quickly. And I know that's not fair. I know that governance is hard and it takes time. I respect that. But if you don't move quickly to ease the pain of people in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of mass unemployment, in the midst of a awakening as regards racial injustice, in the midst of a climate crisis, if you don't go big very, very fast and have the power to do so, then in short order, your opposition will step up and say, see, it didn't matter to elect them. And then you look at what happened in 1994 when Bill Clinton lost his governing majority. You look at what happened in 2010 when Barack Obama lost his governing majority or lost his ability to really, guide things. This is the tremendous danger in our politics. And so it is necessary to go big in the campaign to win big. And then it is necessary to govern big immediately, because if you don't, you create that void, which will be filled by your opposition. And the one thing I keep telling people is Newt Gingrich was very, very bad, right? And, the Mitch McConnell is very, very bad, but Donald Trump is worse. And here's the interesting and terrifying thought. What comes after Donald Trump? How much worse is the next worse? At some point, you have to break the pattern. You've got to break the pattern. And it has to be broken in a big way. And so that's why I would argue that Biden and the Democrats needed to go bigger in this campaign. They need to, if they get power, go bigger in governing, because you don't want to see what would happen if that void is again filled by a Republican Party that seems to be on an arc of increasing tendencies toward radically dangerous, radically extreme, and increasingly authoritarian politics.
John Nichols, national affairs correspondent for The Nation. My sense, as we get to the end of this interview, my sense is that people are already made up their minds and are just waiting for at least their ballot to come in the mail. Is that where we're at? Do you think? What are you looking for between now and November?
Well, here's the good news, I guess, for people who are enthusiastic about Joe Biden, or who are enthusiastic about getting rid of Trump. However, that calculus is made. The good news is that Joe Biden has led the incumbent president for longer than any challenger I believe, in history. He continues to lead in the polls. The fears that people keep putting on the table, right? That there'll be a backlash because of protests, that there will be, some sort of narrowing because Trump is attacking in this way or doing that. do not seem to be realized. The
Well,
polling
Trump
data
just called like the people, military soldiers losers. I mean, what else did he do?
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Well, the polling data at this point suggests that, I don't know if you can hear planes going over me.
Are you in Howard Beach at JFK? That's where underneath.
I don't know. Maybe we should be concerned. But the polling data at this point is very, very strong for Biden. My concern is it is not as strong as it needs to be in the Senate races, although it's not bad. There's good numbers there. And again, I keep emphasizing that there's a lot of encouraging news for Democrats going into the fall, but they cannot be satisfied with a narrow victory, and they cannot aim for a narrow victory. They need to have a substantial increase in their numbers in the Senate, because a Joe Biden presidency with a Mitch McConnell Senate is a disaster, frankly. And so people are locked in, I think increasingly locked in as regards the presidential race. Now it needs to go to the next step and get people thinking about those Senate races and look toward a kind of victory that is transformational. I was just looking back the other day on the results from the 1964 election. And 1964, Lyndon Johnson won a landslide victory for president, one of the historic landslides in American history. But he also won big majorities in the House and the Senate. Now, what's interesting is many of the Senate majorities were very narrow. A few thousand votes here and there were putting people over the top in Senate races. Now, that's the kind of thing you want to be thinking about, because that extra energy, that extra push, that greater enthusiasm can be transformational at levels that are not noticed, or not talked about enough as regards our politics, but could, if they occur, actually create a situation where Joe Biden could, as president of the United States, govern in a bolder and much more functional way. And that's what's tenuous at this point. And that's what needs to be thought about in the next roughly 60 days.
Whew. John Nichols, thank you so much for spending a lot of time with us today. I really appreciate it. And thank you for letting me push back. I agreed with everything you said, but then it was like the fear voice is like, maybe it was a good idea. I don't,
I love the debate. I love the discourse.
Yeah.
I think it's healthy. And again, I really like the way that you approach this.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on. John Nichols writes about politics for The Nation as the national affairs correspondent there. You got to go check out his book. It's the most recent book. It's The Fight for the Soul of the Democratic Party, the enduring legacy of Henry Wallace's anti-fascist, anti-racist politics. John, thanks so much. I appreciate you being on with us today.
Great honor. Thanks so much.